before everybody else kicks off, just to show you that I have also been working, as I know some of you have been working really hard on these. And so, in the midst of climate change caused heat waves, and a world that many are still experiencing as being in pandemic, the crises of nature are becoming more and more apparent. How can we as adults respond to raise young people in a world that they can thrive in and heal? How can we nourish others and ourselves in ways that bring substance back to the earth and take cumulative steps to bringing the earth out of crisis? So our speakers this year have brought a great range of active and a great range of active and personally invested ways of connecting arts, culture and learning to such questions of ecological awareness, sustainability and cultural reparation. The quotes you might have seen briefly at the start of the presentation bring into our room of new voices for today some of the themes that have emerged so far this year. And those quotes were mainly from our speakers in the autumn term, so Bridget McKenzie, Sasha Mabala, Andrew Amundsen, Esther Sayers, Penny Hay, Dennis Atkinson, Erin Manning, all of those people who spoke at our symposium in December as well. And so I've been assembling and listening to those presentations, and of course you're all very welcome to do that and to treat them as cultural texts, because that's how we see our CAL recordings. So weaving threads together, we're going back to ancient pre-industrial ways of visualising connectivity in the midst of revolutions of technology and global digitisation to bring attention back down to earth and to local communities where we can see the interventions that we are making begin to make a difference to human and other than human lives. Imaginative creative play, inventive resourcefulness, embodied action, connecting with affect and caring sensory communication of lived experiences and knowledges. To avoid cognitive and emotional overload are all ways that CAL speakers and audiences have approached what I would like to term caring and motivational assemblages for learning how to make ecologies in practice. The supportive sustainable practices that we've been hearing about mobilise collaboration in dialogical and lateral arts projects with particular attention to the starting places of learning participants and ways to align with their interests and experiences. Ecologies in practice are keeping positive energies moving towards valuing nature, creating spaces for visualising alternatives to the often expedient ways that the Earth's living beings and minerals are forcibly cleared and extracted. Sustainable practices are creating traction towards Earth mobility in entertaining and informing those who might otherwise find enjoyment in trashing the Earth. Ecological motivational assemblages are moving human resources of agency, capacity and imagination that are being wasted and thinned to nothing by forces of capitalism into life-supporting practices. Embodied, material, investigative art forms arguably have a particularly important role in enabling further learning capacity and fulfilling ways of working with sustainable materials and processes. I will link to a couple of examples in my own teaching and experience this year that have made learning experiences of ecology in the arts and Earth crisis particularly apparent. Listening with the work of cultural activists such as Bridget McKenzie, theorists such as Bell Hooks, Patricia Hill-Collins, Felix Guattari, Erin Manning and Dennis Atkinson have gradually increased projects for students at undergraduate and postgraduate level that explore ways of transforming the anger and frustration of lived experiences to become eco-capacities, as Bridget McKenzie talked about, and possibilities for transformative thinking and creative social action, which is a theory from Patricia Hill-Collins. So the image you've seen accompanying the presentation is from an Ecologies in Practice body of sessions that I taught to undergraduate students, and these students have been determined to continue their arts practice despite ongoing pandemic conditions and former educational exclusion from arts practice in dwindling state provision. Some could not find any work that related to their own cultural experiences when we went to the V&A and tried to find artefacts that linked to their cultural experiences, and some could. Students then worked from their own cultural memory objects and their recollections of the curated V&A objects to make sculpture from found and recycled materials. Further ecologies in practice were made. The students created what I might term a motivational assemblage of their made objects and put embodied energies into making a collaborative painting. So this is a slide of Emily Burrows, who is talking about work that she made on the module and was put in the final exhibition, and it was called Dead White Man's Clothes in an African language, in that these clothes are sent over from the West to African countries where the Western people think they're going to actually want them and need them, but they all get discarded a lot of the time. Ben Parry will know about this, and they're not wanted. So she actually got hold of clothes that were worn by her father, who'd sadly passed away, and made this construction and installation from the materials. And so she was, in a way, thinking about how we can decolonise what she said was the second most wasteful industry in the world, which is the fashion industry. So this is Shahana Islam, who's also on that cover image, putting up the painting. And she talks about how her work is in two parts, and that the work outside is food aid, to show that food is plentiful in the world. And I'm just going to check YouTube links. Hopefully yours will work if mine work.
Hi there, my name is Shahana Islam, and I'm just going to go through my art exhibition, what I've done and why I've done it. So my artwork is in two parts. If you look here, it's all the food aid to show that food is plentiful in the world. There's enough to feed everyone on the planet. And then I've done a red line on the ground, so everyone can follow it to go to the other part of the exhibition, which then shows you the children that suffer from hunger, and they try and find food out of the rubbish that we throw away. And so the wall is acting as the barriers, like wars and conflicts and hunger and poverty, that prevents the food aid from getting to them.
So it's been brought into the kind of very body of the way that we teach, and it's connecting with the lives of students, and hopefully we'll be able to continue to do that. So also, fortunately, we were able to work with Tate this year for Ecologies in Practice in the MA Arts and Learning, forming critical pedagogies that could bring in the voices of marginalised groups, who often have something sensible to say about what to do about the Earth crisis. And we related to the arts and curatorial practices of international practitioners such as Heather Bregall of Native American Forge Projects in NYC, Jennifer Stevenson, a decolonial artist working with the African knowledges of plant dyes, Amanda Pena, an ecofeminist performance artist of Nada Productions, Julia Castellini, ecofeminist curator, and Michael Smythe of Nomad Projects, who has a mobile apothecary which is redolent of Wochenklauser's Project One, the medical van, if you've seen our performance, recording of Wochenklauser earlier in the year. So MA students created their own pedagogical explorations, connecting with theories of ecofeminism, diasporic ecologies, arts and ecology for well-being and reparative justice. And these were just some starting points that they were given when they were, the MA students were given when they had to design their own pedagogical practices of ways to get into theories and arts practice. So at times, like Erin Manning said in her discussion of starting places for writing, I've felt the entangled anguish and confusion of multiple tensions. And so to focus on the Earth crisis and making spaces for response to this requires some determination, and at times a gathering of fragments, and a reflection of how momentary breathing spaces for action on the Earth crisis have been created. Sometimes the context of practice is burst into by limitations for activist presences. And how does one respond to activists gluing themselves to historical paintings, for example, in the context of education? How does one respond to a visit of Greta Thunberg to a school where there is a Greta Thunberg class in the context of the school strike? These are all tensions that can be related to in anecdotes of lived experience from our own dimensionalities of being. So my dimensionalities include being a practitioner, researcher, an arts educator, a writer, an artist, and a parent. Our dimensions of self also meet across self-definitions and societal definitions of gender, race, class, sexuality, and ability, as we reflect on what we can bring together for future generations that is good for them and good to the earth. So, for example, on a recent camping trip with my son and a group of 11 children and their parents, I woke at 4 AM to the sound of multiple birds singing, a thriving dawn chorus of other than human diversity, communicating a new day. And it was astonishing for me, living in a city where animals are pared back, killed on the road, kept on leaves. On the second morning, I recorded the sound as a collaborative action in ecological arts practice. And in this, I was in awe of the artistry of nature. As David Fancy says, the capacity for other than human entities to experience artistic production. And this experience reminded me that coexistence between human arts and nature can be taken for granted, or even totally forgotten, when one is living and working in an overcrowded space, sometimes where even cacti don't survive. So in London, I wake to the sound of one solitary bird, with a refrain that calls to mind the Deleuzian sense of the refrain, as a nostalgia for company and diversity. It is this sense of biodiversity and company, a shared awareness of how to take action on each new day, and vocalisation of effect and strategy that I hope we can build as caring motivational assemblages for learning in arts practice. So the Centre for Arts and Learning is continuing to work on Ecologies in Practice in partnership with Climate Museum UK in 22-23, alongside our new theme, which is All for the Arts. I'm now going to hand over to Ben Dixon. You're next on the our presentation.